She came into his mansion as just a maid, quiet, humble, and mysterious. But what he didn't know was that she wasn't there to clean. She was there to destroy him. Yet somehow, she ended up falling in love instead. And when the truth came out, it shattered everything. They called him Ethan Cole, the man who could buy anything except peace. At 35, he had built an empire that stretched across continents, with towers of glass bearing his name in gold. But behind every shining wall of his success was a man who had forgotten how to smile. Ethan's world was luxury without laughter, silence echoing through marble floors and hallways lined with art worth millions. The mansion stood like a monument to his power and his emptiness. He ate alone, walked alone, and trusted no one. People whispered that a woman once shattered him, a woman he gave everything to, only to discover she loved his wealth, not him. Since then, Ethan had buried his heart beneath contracts and numbers, building walls higher than any of his skyscrapers. His mother, frail, gentle, and fading, was the only soul left who could still call him my son without fear. She had begged him for months to hire more help in the house. So one quiet afternoon, he finally agreed. When the new maid arrived, Ethan barely looked up. He was in his study typing furiously when his housekeeper announced her. "Michael, this is the new maid, Isabella." A soft voice followed, "Good afternoon, sir." He only nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. To him, she was just another face, another name that would disappear after a few weeks, like the rest who couldn't endure the mansion's coldness. But Isabella was different. She moved with the calm grace of someone who carried storms inside, but refused to let them show. She spoke little, worked hard, and never looked him in the eyes for too long. She blended into the silence of the house like she belonged there, not to live, but to heal it. Ethan began to notice small things. He'd find his mother smiling again, softly laughing at something Isabella said while feeding her soup. He saw how she stayed late, dusting the piano no one touched for years, as if it mattered. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, he watched her from his balcony, kneeling in the garden, feeding a stray dog that wandered in. She shielded it with her shawl so it wouldn't get wet. Something in that moment struck him. It wasn't just pity or admiration, it was memory. A strange, distant feeling he couldn't name, like déjà vu. He tried to shake it off, convincing himself she was just doing her job. But the more he watched, the more he realized her kindness didn't feel like duty. It felt natural, pure. Days turned into weeks. The mansion began to change, not through renovation, but through her quiet presence. The air felt warmer. The staff whispered less. Even Ethan's mother, who once spent her days in bed, began to sit by the window, humming songs from her youth. Ethan found himself drawn downstairs more often, pretending to need coffee, just to catch glimpses of Isabella arranging flowers or wiping tables. He told himself it was nothing, just curiosity. But deep down, he knew. He was noticing again. Not numbers, not profits. A person. One evening, he entered the living room and froze. Isabella was at the piano, fingers gliding across the keys, playing in melody that tugged something deep within him. It was his father's favorite tune, a song no one else should have known. He stepped closer. How do you know that song? He asked quietly. She startled, her hands freezing on the keys. I just heard it somewhere, she quickly said, eyes down. Ethan studied her face. There was something about her expression, guilt or grief. But he didn't press further. As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of her reflection in the piano's polished surface, and for the first time in years, the great Ethan Cole felt something he hadn't felt since before he lost his heart. Curiosity, warmth, and something dangerously close to love. It started with small things. Ethan Cole, the man whose voice once echoed like thunder through boardrooms, began to soften. He stopped shouting when the coffee wasn't brewed right. He started eating breakfast at the dining table again, sometimes even waiting for Isabella to serve it before starting his day. The staff noticed. They whispered in corners, eyes wide with disbelief. "Have you seen the boss lately?" one murmured. "He smiles now." No one had seen Ethan Cole smile in years, but Isabella's quiet presence had begun to thaw the frost that surrounded him. At first, he resisted the change. He tried to stay buried in his work, convincing himself it was just gratitude for her loyalty. But every time she entered a room, something in him stirred, a calm, unfamiliar warmth that both comforted and unsettled him. He began to talk to her. Simple questions at first. "How's my mother today?" Or, "Did you rest well?" But soon, those questions stretched into conversations. He'd find himself asking about her favorite foods, her childhood, or why she always wore that small silver bracelet on her wrist. But every time he asked about her past, her smile would fade. "Oh, just simple memories, sir," she'd say softly, eyes dropping to the floor. She changed the topic so swiftly, it was almost rehearsed. There was something about that hesitation, something that didn't fit. Ethan was a man who could read people like open books. But Isabella, she was a closed novel written in a language he didn't yet understand. One late evening, after a long day at work, Ethan walked past the grand hall and heard a faint melody, the same melody that haunted his childhood, his father's favorite song. He followed the sound like a man under a spell. There she was again, Isabella, at the piano, her eyes closed, her fingers moving like she was born for the keys. The tune carried emotion, sadness, nostalgia, love, all woven into one quiet, perfect moment. When she noticed him, she froze. Ethan's voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like glass. "How do you know that song?" She blinked, hands trembling. I just picked it up somewhere." "Somewhere?" he repeated, stepping closer. "That song isn't popular. My father composed it himself. I haven't heard it since—" His voice trailed off. Isabella's eyes glistened, but she quickly stood up and bowed her head. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to intrude." Before he could say another word, she hurried away, leaving the notes still echoing in the air, ghostly and beautiful. But that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the song. He kept seeing her face, kept wondering how she knew something so personal, so hidden. Days passed, and the connection between them deepened. He'd catch himself watching her laugh with his mother, her joy lighting up the room in ways money never could. He found excuses to cross her path, asking for tea when he didn't need it, pretending to forget files just to see her face again. And sometimes, when their eyes met, there was something there, a pull neither could explain, but both could feel. But underneath that warmth, curiosity grew like a shadow. Who was she? Why did she look at him sometimes as if she already knew him, as if she carried his memories? He wanted to ask again, but every time he opened his mouth, her soft smile silenced him. It wasn't the time. Not yet. Still, something inside him whispered, "This woman isn't just a maid. She's part of a story I haven't finished reading." And that thought, both thrilling and terrifying, was how the cold billionaire finally began to fall. Ethan Cole had never been this distracted in his life. Meetings passed like whispers. Business deals blurred in his mind because somewhere in his mansion, a quiet maid was living rent-free in his thoughts. He tried to fight it, but love has a way of disarming even the most guarded hearts. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt human again. But not everyone was blind to the change. One evening, during a charity gala downtown, Ethan's longtime friend and business associate, Ryan Blake, pulled him aside. Ryan had a reputation for noticing things others missed. "Ethan," he said, sipping his drink, "that new maid of yours, Isabella, right?" Ethan frowned. "What about her?" Ryan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You might want to look into her. She's different. Too polished to be a maid, the way she carries herself, educated, refined. That's not someone who spent her life scrubbing floors." Ethan brushed it off at first, forcing a laugh. "You're overthinking, Ryan. She's just kind." But Ryan smirked. "Kind, or pretending to be. Be careful, my friend. The richer you are, the more masks people wear around you." The words echoed long after Ryan left. And for the first time, Ethan wondered who really was Isabella. That night, back in the mansion, Ethan couldn't shake the thought. He began to observe quietly, not as a man in love, but as the cautious billionaire he'd always been. He noticed how Isabella avoided phone calls, how she sometimes stepped out at night to stare at the city lights with a sadness she tried to hide. He noticed the way her hands trembled whenever his father's name came up. And then, one afternoon, he found something unexpected. His mother had misplaced her medicine, and Isabella had rushed to her room to fetch it. When Ethan walked in to help, his eyes caught something half hidden beneath Isabella's tray. A small leather-bound diary with initials engraved on the cover. I M. He didn't touch it, but curiosity burned in him like fire. Meanwhile, Isabella's world was collapsing in silence. Each day she served Ethan, her heart grew heavier with guilt. In her diary that night, she wrote, "I came here for revenge, to expose the man whose empire destroyed my father's company. But every time I see the kindness in his eyes, I lose my strength."
She was the daughter of Martin Miles, the man who once partnered with Ethan's late father in business until a scandal destroyed her family's name. Her father died in shame, leaving her mother broken and penniless. For years, Isabella believed Ethan's company caused it all. So she came into his home, under a false name to gather proof and ruin him. But she hadn't expected to see the truth behind the monster she imagined, a man with pain, with loss, with a mother who adored him, and she hadn't expected her own heart to betray her. A week later, the tension finally broke. Ethan found her in the garden at dusk, her hair catching the last glow of the sunset. He had rehearsed the words 100 times, but when he stood before her, they came out raw. "Isabella," he said quietly, "I don't know what this feeling is, but I can't ignore it anymore. You make me feel alive again." She froze, tears filling her eyes. He took a step closer. "Tell me I'm not imagining this, that you feel it too." Her lips trembled. She wanted to confess everything, the truth, the lies, the pain. But fear chained her words. Instead, she whispered, "I do. But what?" he asked gently. She shook her head, stepping back. "Nothing, sir. Please, don't say more." And then she ran, leaving him standing there, confused, heart pounding, and a question burning in his mind. What is she hiding from me? That night, as Ethan stared out his window, his reflection looked back. The same man who once swore never to love again. But now, love had found him, and it carried a secret sharp enough to break him all over again. The next morning, Ethan couldn't focus. Isabella's words echoed in his head. "I do, but what?" What was she trying to say before running away? He'd barely slept. His thoughts were restless, chasing shadows of doubt. Ryan's warning, her secretive glances, the song she played, it all began to swell together like storm clouds ready to break. That was when his phone buzzed. It was Charles, his private investigator, a man who had served Ethan for years, discreet and thorough. "Sir," he said, cautiously, "you asked me to run a background check on your maid, Isabella Miles. I found something." Ethan's chest tightened. "Go on." "Her real name isn't Isabella Moore, as she claimed. It's Isabella Miles, daughter of Martin Miles. You might remember the name. He was the man your father's company acquired 15 years ago. The one who, well, didn't survive the scandal that followed." Silence. Ethan's heart froze. Martin Miles. That name belonged to a ghost from his past. A man his father once called a friend before everything fell apart. He remembered the lawsuit, the media storm, the collapse of Miles's business. So, this whole time, she knew. Charles continued. "She applied under a false identity. And sir, I also found letters, notes. She's been keeping a record of your routines, your habits, almost like she was gathering evidence." Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He hung up, anger boiling through his veins. By evening, the mansion was heavy with tension. He walked into the living hall like a storm, every step echoing authority and betrayal. The staff paused mid-task, their eyes darting nervously. Isabella stood near the staircase, holding a tray of flowers she'd arranged for his mother. When she saw his face, her heart dropped. "Ethan," she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, Ethan threw a folder on the floor. Her diary spilled open, its pages fluttering across the marbles like wounded doves. "So?" he said quietly, his voice trembling with rage. "This is who you are?" Her face went pale. You lied to me," he roared, his voice cutting through the room. "You came into my home under a false name, pretending to care, pretending to love. Was this your plan? To ruin me? To finish what your father started?" Tears welled in her eyes as she dropped to her knees, clutching the diary. "Ethan, please listen to me. Yes, I came here for revenge, I won't deny that. But everything changed when I got to know you. You are not the man I thought you were. I stayed because you what? Because you love me. Her silence was answer enough. For a second, pain flashed across his face, real, raw pain. But pride and betrayal smothered it just as quickly. I can't believe I fell for you, he whispered, voice breaking. All this time, I thought you were the one person who saw me, not my money. Turns out, you just wanted my past. She tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. Leave, he said coldly. Before I call security. Ethan, please. I said leave. The staff stood frozen as she ran up the stairs, tears blurring her vision. Minutes later, the sound of the front door closing echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, the light dimmed, the diary open before him. He read her words again, the early pages filled with anger, the later ones trembling with love. Her handwriting changed as her heart did, and that realization hurt.
He replayed every moment, her laughter with his mother, the piano song, the gentle smile she gave him that night in the garden. Could it be? Was it all a lie, or had it become something real? He looked out the window into the quiet night. For the first time, his mansion felt emptier than ever, colder, darker, and painfully quiet. The mighty Ethan Cole had built walls to protect himself from love, and the one woman who managed to climb over them had just walked away. The mansion that once hummed with life had grown silent. Ethan walked through its marble halls alone now. No laughter, no scent of coffee, no soft footsteps echoing in the corridors. Every corner reminded him of her. Isabella's laughter in the garden, her warm smile in the kitchen, the way her eyes softened whenever she said, "You are not as cold as you pretend to be." Weeks had passed since he threw her out, yet sleep still refused to visit him peacefully. He'd replayed that night over and over, her trembling voice saying, "I came for revenge, but I stayed because I fell in love with you." And every time, guilt tightened around his chest like a vice. One morning, as the first rays of sun broke through his window, his butler entered quietly. "Sir, this arrived for you." It was a letter, neatly folded, sealed with an unfamiliar crest, but the handwriting, delicate and firm, was unmistakable. Isabella. He tore it open, his hands trembling slightly. "Ethan, I owe you the truth, not for my sake, but for yours. My father's death wasn't your doing. He was betrayed by your former partner, Mr. Vance. Vance took bribes, forged documents, and framed your company to escape the charges. My father discovered it too late. He tried to warn you, but the guilt and shame consumed him. I found proof after I left, and I can't carry it silently. You may never forgive me for lying, but please know, my love was real, always. Isabella." The letter slipped from his hands. He sank into his chair, eyes wide, heart pounding with the sudden clarity of truth. Vance, his trusted friend, his business partner of 10 years, the man he defended while pushing away the only woman who truly loved him. "God," he muttered, rubbing his face. "What have I done?" Within hours, he had launched a full investigation. The evidence Isabella spoke of was undeniable. Vance had siphoned company funds, bribed officials, and used Isabella's father as a scapegoat. The guilt Ethan felt was unbearable, but it wasn't just the betrayal of his business that broke him. It was the memory of how cruelly he had treated her. Days later, he finally tracked her down. She was in a small rural town, far from the city lights and luxury. Ethan stood at the edge of a playground, watching her from a distance. Children ran around her, laughing freely. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back. No diamonds, no glamour,
just peace. He waited until the children dispersed before walking toward her. She turned, surprised, her eyes widening at the sight of him. "Ethan," she breathed. He swallowed hard, guilt heavy in his throat. "I got your letter," he said. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft breeze. "I was right," he continued. "Vance, he was behind everything. Your father tried to stop him. I should have believed you," his voice cracked. "I should have believed us." Tears welled in her eyes, but she stood tall. "I didn't want revenge anymore, Ethan. I just wanted peace. That's why I built this place. These children, they are my new beginning." He stepped closer, eyes soft. "Then let me help you build it, not with money, but with my heart." For the first time in weeks, Isabella smiled faintly. The same gentle, forgiving smile that once melted every wall around him. Months later, the mansion came alive again. But this time, it wasn't just a house, it was a home. The staff whispered with joy as bells chimed softly in the courtyard. Isabella walked down the aisle in a flowing white gown, her steps slow, graceful. Ethan waited at the end, his eyes glistening with the weight of love reborn. And when he took her hand, he whispered, "This time, forever." She smiled. Forever. In the same mansion where betrayal once tore them apart, love finally found its way home. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the mansion, washing its marble walls in gold. Once a house of pride and secrets, it now glowed with warmth and laughter. The scent of fresh flowers filled the halls, lilies, Isabella's favorite. The staff moved with smiles instead of fear. The sound of children's laughter echoed faintly from the garden, where Isabella had opened a small orphanage wing. It was no longer just Ethan's mansion. It was their home. Months had passed since the quiet wedding, a ceremony so intimate it felt like a whisper between two souls who had endured storms and finally found peace. The world saw a powerful couple, but those who truly knew them saw something deeper. Two broken hearts that learned to heal each other. Ethan stood by the balcony, watching Isabella below as she helped a group of children plant flowers. The way she knelt in the soil, smiling softly, reminded him how she'd brought life back not only to the house, but to him. He still remembered that first morning after their wedding. She'd stood in the kitchen, in her nightgown, barefoot, insisting on making breakfast herself. "This house needs the smell of real food," she had said, laughing when he tried to stop her. It was such a simple moment, yet for Ethan, it was the beginning of something sacred, a home that finally felt alive.
That night, as they sat together on the porch, Isabella spoke softly. "Do you know why I forgave you?" He looked at her, unsure. "Because love isn't about perfection," she said. "It's about redemption. You faced your pride, Ethan. You listened. That's something most people never learn to do." Her words stayed with him, echoing through every boardroom meeting, every speech, every quiet morning beside her. He began to rebuild his company, but this time with integrity as its foundation. He named his new charity branch after her father, the DeLuca Foundation, to honor the man whose name had once been stained by lies. The mansion soon became more than a home. It became a symbol. Every month, they opened its doors to host dinners for the children's home, business partners, and workers who once feared speaking up. Ethan had built empires before, but now he was building something eternal, legacy through love. Sometimes, when the moonlight streamed across their room, Isabella would rest her head on his chest and whisper, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" He would smile faintly, tracing her hair with his fingers. Every day, and every time,
I thank fate for bringing the woman who came for revenge but stayed for love. She'd laugh softly. Then let's make sure our story reminds others that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings. And so, in the grand mansion that once witnessed lies, betrayal, and pain, now lived forgiveness, laughter, and truth. The chandeliers still shone the same, but this time their light carried something no gold could ever buy: redemption through love.